Hello and welcome everyone to Google Office Apps, Tips and Tricks. Today we'll be discussing how to insert images and pictures. So here we have one of our practice documents here in Google Docs and this formatting and editing page, and we can see that it's many pages long. And so we're going to scroll down a little bit and find a spot right about here should work. Kind of in the middle of our page here, we'd like to just put a picture somewhere or an image. So how do we do that? There's a couple ways that we can do it. First of all, remember that we have our quick access toolbar here, and all of these features, some 20 or so that we see displayed, remember, are some of the most common features that are being used in Google Docs, but all of these commands, buttons, drop-down menus, these features are available, in fact, up here in the tabs with the drop-down menus. And so there's several different things that we can find up here that do not happen to be on the quick access toolbar. But when we're thinking about inserting an image or a picture, I usually put my cursor kind of where the general area where I'd like to do it. Once we get it there, of course, we can move it around very easily. So let's take a look up here in a quick access toolbar. We see there's an insert image icon here with a drop-down menu. And we see that there's several different sources that we could get our image. And of course, if we go up here to the insert button, the very first option here, let's try that again, is the exact same thing. So there's always more than one way to get to it. So we have our cursor placed where we want it in the middle of the page. And so let's look at the first one, upload from your computer. If you happen to have a file or a folder inside your computer's hard drive, whether it's a laptop or a desktop computer, and you've got some images in there or pictures, they can be JPEGs, GIFs, they can be all kinds of different files or whatever. If you had those, you can click here and go search for them and then import them into your Google Doc document. Another way is to search on the web. And remember that Google is the king of all things searches, and so you can find just about anything you need or would like on the World Wide Web. But also note, since this is a Google Docs product, it's also associated with Google Drive, and you may have in your Google Drive a folder with a number of different images stored there. And so you can click on this particular choice and go get the image and import it into this document. Also, Google Photos, you can get from there. If it's on the World Wide Web and you happen to know what the Uniform Resource Locator or internet address is, you can simply click here, put in that address, and it will import that picture there. Also, if you have a digital camera and you want to take a picture of something and then import it into your document, you can do it that way. But for our purposes today, we're just going to simply use search the web option. So here we go. And over here on the left, we see that we're going to be searching Google Images. And we have a place up here where the cursor is already blinking. So I'm going to type in something. I love horses. So I'm going to type in horse and then hit enter. And then very quickly, you can see that there's many different pictures of horses. So the first thing I want to share with you is that Google is really good about serving up lots of images that most likely are not going to have any copyright issues, things that we're able to use freely and put into our documents. And so that's nice that they do that. And we'll just kind of scroll through here for a moment and look at the many different options that we see. Now, all of these pictures are coming from somewhere in the web, from different websites, from different places. And some of the pictures are very large files. They're very detailed, clear pictures. Others might be a little bit blurry. They're in a smaller file, less pixels. And so sometimes it's kind of a hit and miss of what you're going to do or what you're going to find. But for our purposes, we're going to start with this one right here, one that we've used before in other classes. And so to insert this, all we have to do is select it. And you see the check mark there. This little banner pops up and says, hey, you want to insert it? But if you come to Mr. J's classes, you'll know that I'm always talking about left click, right click, double click, triple click, and depending on where you are, good things can happen. And so right now, all I'm going to do is just simply double click on this, and I don't have to hit that insert button down there. As you can see, this is a very large file, and it's very clear. And if you recall, we were on this very first page, and I put my cursor somewhere in the middle, and sure enough, that's where it's placed it. So one of the first things I'm going to share with you is you'll notice that our quick access toolbar is exactly the same as it was when we started this video. or this presentation. But the moment I click on this image here, this picture, notice that now our options have changed. Some of the same tools that we had before are still available there. Some things have kind of collapsed, like we don't see all of our ones dealing with fonts like bold and underline and all that, but we see all kinds of things associated with this image. Well, the first thing I want to do is I want to make this more manageable. It's taking up the entire screen here. So we have these manipulation points that we see in all four corners and then also in the middle of each of the sides. And so you can grab them and you can pull it down and make it a much smaller image, and that way it's a little bit easier to deal with. Another thing that I'll point out, if you ever have an image that doesn't have a locked aspect ratio, this one does. So that means that when I'm bringing it in from the corner, it's not going to squish it or stretch it in one way. The image is going to be locked in its aspect ratio so that it looks exactly the same as just a smaller version of the much larger one. So that's a nice feature that allows us to do that. All right, we'll make it a little bit smaller. That's pretty good. Now let's try and grab it right here and pull it over. I'm left clicking and dragging and it's not working. So the next thing we'll notice is that we have down here a little blue gray circle around this first option here, and it says inline. And that's in fact where this image is at this point. We had our cursor right here about the third or fourth paragraph down, and so it has placed it in line. But we have several other options. Let's take a look at them. So I hover over that. There's wrap text, there's break text, there's behind the text. So that means that the image would be behind the text, or you can have it in front of the text. And there's several other options we'll look at in just a moment. But for our purposes, I enjoy using this one called wrap text because you have a lot more control over the image. So let's go ahead and select that. All right, so now you can see that we have the text wrapping around it, which is why it's called wrap text. You'll also notice that these lines of words here, these sentences are lined up very close to the image. In fact, they are 1/8 of an inch away because that's what's selected by default. Let's go ahead and left click and drag this now and move it to somewhere else. And we can see that the words are in fact wrapping all the way around this. But we still have more things that we can do to control this at this point. Just for fun, just remember that this little guy up here at the top, if you get up there, you grab it. That allows you to change the angle of the picture. In fact, you can flip it in all kinds of ways. I'm not too fond of that, so we'll just do our handy little undo trick here to bring it back. Let's see if we can bring it up a little bit right there. Okay, that looks pretty good. So we have our image there. Let's look at some of the different options real quick. So we can change the margin around it, meaning that like right here, we can see it's 1/8 of an inch. It can also be 1/8 of an inch on all these different sides here, but depending on where, how long the words are in sentences, it will get close or not so close depending on what's over there. So Microsoft wouldn't quite fit here and still have 1/8 of an inch left, so it bumped it down to the next line, which is why it looks like it's far away over there. Well, let's go ahead and try something a little more drastic. How about 1/2 inch? All right, so now we can see that nothing can get within 1/2 inch of that image. So that's pretty cool. And then of course, if we go to adjust it, then it's still going to keep it at 1/2 inch. Well, I kind of like the 1/8 of an inch, so let's go back there. Just know that you have lots of options on how to adjust the text in this case on the wrapping it around the image. All right, so here's another thing. Over here it says move with text. That's the one that comes by default. What does that mean? That means if I come up here and I add several paragraphs, that the position that you see, the images of these horses here, as they are set inside of this paragraph, they'll stay like that and they'll just move down to the page, and if necessary to the next page or the next page as you change stuff up here, because it's set to move with text. But there's another option. You can fix it on the page. And so our image can stay right there where it is. And as you add more text up here, the sentences and paragraphs start to flow down. They'll still have their little 1/8 inch gap around it and all of that, but it will stay fixed on the page. For our purposes, we're going to go ahead and leave it just where it is and have it move with the text. I kind of like the way that that works. All right, so there we have it set at this point. There's some other interesting things that Google does that actually Microsoft Word doesn't even do. So let's go ahead and move this again. And you'll notice as I'm moving it around, Everything we've set it up to do is still working and it's doing just fine. But you notice every once in a while, I see this red vertical line appear. What is that? Well, if I get it just to the right spot where the red vertical line is, and if I'm careful and I let it go, then what that's saying is we are exactly, with this picture is exactly in the middle of the page as far as left to right. Or stated differently, the side of the image here is equidistant to the margin as this right side is over here to the other margin. Or you could state it differently, equidistant from the edge of the image all the way to the edge of the paper, and the same on this side over here. So that's pretty cool. And how do we do that? We just have to look for that red line to appear and let it go. Well, if we look at our image here, we can see here's the top of our page. And we scroll down and here's the bottom of the page. We're pretty close to the middle as far as up and down. So let's see if we can move this around a little bit and find another red line. Oh, there we go. So again, if you move it out of position, you'll have to go down and find it. There it is. It's now equidistant from top to bottom as far as the image is concerned. And if I move it just carefully to the left, I can now have it centered exactly in the middle of the page. I'm going to go ahead and put it there. Is that important? Do I want to keep it there? Not necessarily, especially if I'm going to leave it with move to text, it's going to move anyway. So if there was something that you wanted right in the middle, then of course you just go down here and you would change it to fix position on page. So that's kind of cool because Microsoft Word does not have that feature that I'm aware of, at least on the version that I'm using, which is 2016. Perhaps they'll put it in future ones. So again, I have clicked away on the text over here, and we'll see our quick access toolbar is back to normal. And if I want to get my my different features for working with images or pictures, I just simply click on the picture. All right, so at this point, let's take a look at a couple other options that we have here. So we look up here and we see this little icon here, and it says border color. All right, let's take a look. Well, right now there is no border. Let's go ahead and make a border. What color should we make? How about a very bright blue here, very intense blue. That's interesting. And if we look up here, we see border weight. So right now that's a 2-point. Maybe we want it, maybe not so severe, maybe a little bit smaller, something like that. And if we click away, we can kind of see what that's going to look like. That color almost works. That's kind of cool. All right, maybe we want it to be even more intense and make it very thick like that. If we click away, then we can see what that's going to look like. For our purposes, just for fun, how about we just put it somewhere in the middle of about a 3? Sure, why not? All right, just know that there's other options. And of course, we have a solid line. We can make it into dotted like that. That looks a little bizarre. And we can make it into these little hash marks going around there, something like that. I think I prefer to have it just a solid line. That looks pretty cool. You notice up here it says save to drive. And this is just a reminder that all things Google are happening through your browser. And every click of the mouse, every stroke of the keyboard is interacting with the Google server farms, otherwise known as the euphemism, the cloud. And so because we're going back and forth through this browser from my computer up into the cloud, everything that we do is being recorded. So if I go back here, for example, and I just change this again to another one, watch up here what happens when I do it. Saving, takes a couple seconds, save to drive. And so if something were to happen to my computer right now and it didn't work anymore, I could go buy another one, get on the cloud, access my Google account, open up my formatting and editing document that I'm working on here, and there it would be looking just like that. But again, I like it a solid line, so let's go ahead and put it back. Oh, wrong one. Over here, make it into a solid line, saving, and done. All right, and that might take a little longer or even a little bit less time depending on your internet connection or how busy your internet connection is. So just keep that in mind. A couple other options here. Sometimes we have an image that we've imported and we like part of it, but maybe we don't want all of it. So we have this option here called crop image. Let's take a look at that. And now we see we have these little black bars kind of in the corners, in the middle, kind of where our manipulation points are. And so with that, we can start to make some adjustments. So maybe on this image, we don't want our little foal here, and we just want to leave the horse there, the mare. And so I can move it over this way. And now we just have an image of a single horse. And if we want to do still more, we could grab the corners and move it up that way and change it to something much smaller. Maybe that's how we want to crop that image. Well, notice that when we did that, I'm going to go ahead and click away from that to set it. So that's pretty cool. But maybe I want it to go back. So let's go ahead and click on it again. You'll notice now next to the crop image that this icon showed up, and it says reset image. Oh, that's nice. So we do that, and it's going to keep it the same size, but it's going to put the image all the way back. And by the way, it also got rid of our border, didn't it? So keep that in mind when you're resetting an image. Well, let's try a couple more things. Make that a little bit bigger again. And just so quickly we can go in there and make this, and boom, we get it back pretty much to the way that it was. All right, so clicking on it again, image options. We're going to look at that in just a second. But this is really slick, replace image. So we've taken some time and some care to make sure that this image is in the center of our page right now. We have it wrapped in text and with, 1/8 of an inch margin and all that. If we decide we don't like this picture, or perhaps we've found a better one, it'd be a real bummer if we had to redo all that. So Google has created this replace image little thing here. So again, we click on it and it says, well, where do you want to get the image from? Well, for our purposes, we'll go to the web, and it doesn't know that we still want horses. So it's going to give me the option to type that in. I'm going to type in another horse. There we go, hit enter. And now I'm looking around for a different horse that I'm going to put in there. And for our purposes, how about we just pick this guy right here? So again, I'm going to use that little trick of just double clicking and give it a couple of seconds to load. And boom, there it is. So you'll see we still have an 1/8 of an inch margin. We still have the wrap text. We still have the position on the page and all that. We just have a whole new image. So that's pretty slick to be able to do that. And again, it could be an image from any one of these other sources as well. So thank you, Google, for doing that. At this point, I think I like the image of the mama and baby horse there. So I'm going to go ahead and undo that and bring back our original one that's there. All right. So what else can we do with all this? There's definitely more options here. So let's go ahead and look at this little ellipsis here. It says image options. And if I click on it, it says size and rotation. Well, we know about that. We did that before by grabbing the corners and stretching or condensing our image. And then of course we have this little one here that we can change the rotation of the image. That's pretty cool. And then here's one for other adjustments that we can do. And then all image options right there. So if we click on that, it's the same as going over here and clicking on this, and watch what happens to the right of our screen. So now we have our image options pane open up here on the side, and we have these expansion arrows here so that we can look at all these different options that are available to us. So let's just go ahead and start at the top, size and rotation. There we go. So right now, this image is 2.8 inches wide. The height is 1.88 inches tall. And then the width scale is 100%, height scale 100%. We have the aspect ratio is now locked. It's been locked from the beginning. But if for some reason we want to stretch this in some way, we could simply deselect that check mark there. And then we'll be able to make these adjustments or whatever. And again, we can change the angle here. We can rotate it to whatever degrees we want. And we can do all that right here. How about for fun, we just go ahead and start to change it. Look at that, one at a time. Or if we want to just quickly do 90 degrees, boom, we can do 90 degrees from where we were. Since we're at 3, now we're at 90. So we'll go back all the way down to 90. There we go. And flip it again, go all the way around if you want. So we have these options here that we can do as far as size and rotation. And so we're going to hit this expansion button and minimize it so it goes back. And let's take a look at this option, text wrapping. This should look familiar. It's the same icons that we see down here are much larger. And since there's a blue line around the wrap text option, we know that this is the text wrapping option that is in play. And that's the one we like, so we're pretty good. But check this out. If you just want all of the text to be on one side, look at this, you have some options. Right now it's on both sides, which I kind of like. But if we only want it on the left, that entire paragraph section is just going to be on the left. Of course, if we want it to be on the right only, we could do it the other way, and we might have a reason for doing that. For me, I kind of like it on both sides, but certainly an option right there. And then margins from the text, you can make some adjustments all the way around, all four sides, and make those adjustments as far as wrapping text. That's pretty cool. All right, let's go over here and shrink down. We'll come back to here. We're going to try a behind the text and show you something kind of cool here in a little bit. All right, so position, again, move with the text. That's what we have. If we want to fix it on the page, and we'll let, if we add sentences and paragraphs above it, it will start to cascade down and the picture will stay the same if we fix it on the page. And then, of course, we can control the X and Y axis very finitely here, which is pretty cool. We like where it is, so we'll go ahead and minimize that one or collapse that expansion button. And let's take a look at this one. This one's kind of interesting. Right now, it says no recolor. Well, what are our options? Wow. So if we scroll down here a little bit, let's see if we can scroll down and see all the different options. So if we want, we can make it kind of gray. That's interesting. If we're printing this out in black and white, maybe that's the way we want to do it. We can already see it's in a grayscale. That's kind of slick. We'll scroll down again. We have this one. Kind of looks like an X-ray or something, everything like a negative you would. Back in the olden days before our iPhones, when we actually had to develop film and we would have our negatives that we'd look at. And it was kind of the opposite of the, in this case, the colors and the grayscale, basically. That's pretty cool. The negative. Maybe we can make it all yellow. That's a little washed out. But all of these different options are here, and you might have a reason for doing that. Maybe you have a very colorful document and you want it to match somehow. Just know that you have all of these different options here. And if you decide that you don't like these options, and that one's kind of cool. It looks like a daguerreotype back in the olden days. The sepia, there it is. All right, and of course we can always select no recolor and it will take it back to where it was originally. All right, let's collapse that expansion button and we'll expand this one right here, adjustments. Now look at this, this is interesting. We've got transparency. That's the first option we have. Right now it's not being used at all. Brightness, we're kind of in the middle, and contrast kind of in the middle. Let's start with brightness. So we could start to make it brighter. And remember, we're interacting through our browser here with the Google servers, the cloud we call it. And so you might make an adjustment and it might take a couple seconds for the picture to change because it's the server farm sending that data back and forth. So now you can appreciate that this is actually happening at near the speed of light or data transmission through the internet. Pretty wild stuff. But sometimes you'll click it and it'll take a few seconds for it to adjust. That actually doesn't look too bad. And then contrast. Maybe we can play with that a little bit. Maybe change it a little bit. So we have lots of different things we can do here to adjust the way the image looks. And of course, if we want to reset it, we could do that. It'll take it back to normal, in this case, the 50s. Let's take a look at the transparency. So I'm going to put it about 50% and let it go. That's interesting. Let's take it over here to about 70%, give or take. That's kind of interesting too. Well, why would we want to do that? Well, if we make this image transparent, then we have some pretty cool options that we can do here. So if you remember, we have right now, we have it set at wrap the text. Well, what's the next one? Break the text. And the one after that is behind the text. So if you've ever seen a maybe a news article in a magazine or something like that, or something you've seen, a newsletter or something, and there's like an image behind the text, well, this is the way you would do it. We simply click behind the text. And now, no longer is the text wrapped around. It's the image is right there. Of course, we probably want to get rid of that border. So let's go ahead and do that right now. That couldn't be easier. So can't get to it. There we go. Notice, by the way, and this is a little fun. If you click away from it, because it's behind the text, I'm now clicking on the text. I can change the text here because the image is behind it. Fortunately, we have this little spot over here where there is no text, so we can click and get our control back. So what happens if you're actually, do this and you can't get a hold of your pictures behind there? Well, one of the ways would be is to just put your cursor somewhere in your text and hit your enter key a few times, make a white space, and then you can get back to it. But for our purposes, let's go up here and we're going to say none. So now we have no border. So if I go ahead and deselect it there, we can see that looks pretty cool. But let's go ahead and stretch this out a little bit. Maybe we want this much larger on our page. So let's go ahead and go all the way across. And there we go. I'm going to click away from it. So now we can see that our image is sitting there right behind it. Now remember, we're at about 70% of transparency. You can see that it doesn't work so well if we're like that. It's a little bit harder to read because the black of the text is mixing in with the black of the horses. So depending on your image, you might have to adjust it different ways. I think for this one, we'd probably be better off closer to maybe 80%, somewhere over there. And so we can still see that there's a horse behind there. And be thinking about if you're working at a school site somewhere, maybe it could be the school mascot is behind there, the image that you put in. And you could just kind of, you could make it invisible a little bit and so that it sits behind there, just make it more transparent. That's a pretty slick thing that you can do with all of that. So that's pretty cool. All right, so let's see. At this point, we have pretty much covered all of the different features that are available for working with images. We have all kinds of adjustments we can make as far as the size goes, adjustments in transparency, brightness, contrast, and all of that. And if we need to, we can reset it very quickly and put it back. And then, of course, we can adjust the sizes just like this, and we can wrap the text and then put it back where we had it before, all that quickly. And again, if we use the little red lines, we can line it up in the middle of the page, either vertically or horizontally, depending on what our needs are. So that is pretty much in the nutshell how to insert an image or a picture. And so that's pretty slick. So thank you so much for coming to learn some tips and tricks today for Google Docs, how to insert images and pictures. And we're grateful that you were with us today and hope you'll watch some of our other videos. And please tell your colleagues about these training videos so that more of us can be trained on all of these neat features in Google Docs and all of the Google Office apps. Thank you so much and have a great day.